The idea that play is a really important ingredient in terms of our ability to evolve and grow. I think we take life really seriously at times, especially as entrepreneurs, driven entrepreneurs, women entrepreneurs, like, we gotta, stay focused. We gotta get ahead. Da, 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 da. And I've come to find that some of my biggest breakthroughs come when I'm having fun, when I'm playing, when I'm doing things that are just like joyful, spontaneous. And so I would leave that one out there for folks to just be like, where are the places where I could play a little bit more?
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Empire Life podcast. I'm Allison Ramsey, your host, and I'm the founder of Empire Life. We support female founders from all around the world to scale their businesses through mentoring and coaching. And today I'm here with Heather Wickman. She's an executive coach and author, and she helps entrepreneurs overcome stubborn roadblocks. And I'll hand it over to her to intro herself a little bit more.
Thank you. It's lovely to be here. I am an author, so I've got a book out right now, which is called The Evolved Executive. The Future of Work is Love in Action. And that has been a labor of love over the last several years. So it's fun to have that out in the world. And I am kind of, I would say, an accidental entrepreneur. I climbed the corporate ladder for 12 plus years and thought that was my gig. Like, I thought that was the thing that I was supposed to do, until I kind of had that corporate crack where I was like, oh my God, I cannot do this anymore. And I'm sure you've had many clients in similar situations of, that kind of values alignment, that purpose misalignment that says, okay, the security and safety is nice, but there's this tugging at my heart that says I need to do something different. And so let's see, back in 2015, jumped out on my own and founded Untethered, which is the organization that I run today, and started out doing pretty much traditional executive coaching. And then over the course of 7 years and the trajectory of my own life, the focus of this company has shifted a bit. And I found both internally and externally doing executive coaching that we need a little bit more than just kind of our talk coach interaction. And that oftentimes folks who come to me have been with coaches already, have done the self-help thing, have done the videos, the online courses, and needed something a little bit more. And so we've developed a growth formula that involves a peak experience. And so we work with horses, so equine facilitated coaching, as well as plant medicine to help people really shift their paradigms and kind of catalyze new insight to get over some of these really difficult roadblocks in their life. And so that's a little bit about who I am. I live in Colorado. Got 4 horses, 2 dogs, 2 cats, a husband. So it feels like we live on a little zoo here, but I love it.
And your kids live with you? Did you say kids?
We've got 8 fur babies. But
oh my gosh. Wow.
Yeah, no human kids.
So your fur babies are always coming in and out, and
always.
Oh. What I hear you saying too, Heather, is when they go through this peak experience, it's unlocking. I'm sure that it's imaginable or invaluable, the kind of roadblocks or traumas that. Do you have a facilitator who comes in to kind of the reintegration, like after they, or is that something that you do after they go back and they're in their home and all of those traumas had started to come up? And
it's a really insightful question, because most people think about the peak experience and they're like, wow, that's what I want. And actually the work happens afterwards, after the peak experience is complete. And that is where the majority of my work comes in. So we partner with individuals, if it's like plant medicine, to facilitate that process. I'm by no means trained in that space. We don't tend to get a lot of clients that are deeply working on trauma. Just to make that a clarification, it's more about the entrepreneurs and executives who are a little bit stuck and wanting to work on something in their more professional life. So a big career transition, a massive shift from how they lead. Maybe they're wanting to get out of corporate, like my story, and go into the entrepreneurial way, but are butting up against a fear, a limitation, an assumption that they can't. And so these peak experiences, exactly like you mentioned, they kind of, they're the kick in the pants. They're this catalyst that shows you something about yourself that you didn't know before. And it's the integration process afterwards that is most important, because you can have the aha, like a mentor said to me, the aha is cheap. It's the work afterwards where you try to integrate the change into your life and into your leadership that actually matters. And so that's where the bulk of our work comes in, is how do you actually make those insights, revelations? And sometimes we are healing elements of trauma. How do we allow those things to be embodied in our life so that we can show up differently in the ways that we want?
Yes, I agree with all of those, and the reintegration. I've had a lot of clients mention to me about some of those peak experiences. I've had some myself with going to a great event or
Yeah.
having some sort of plant medicine, not the exact ones that you were talking about. And then how can I then implement this into my life?
Right.
And because you can go to an amazing event and be around founders or incredible people. Then when you come back, if you don't make the effort to stay in touch with them or see how you can support them, or take what you've learned and apply that to your business, it's kind of like you're never going to find what you're looking for. You can just keep going to the event after event. And
exactly. Yeah. And that's similar here. Like, people just want to do peak experience after peak experience. And we're like, wait. Like, how have you done integrating the last peak experience? Because that usually tells you where the work needs to happen.
It's true. It's that work. Well, I was going to say too, for me personally, with my money mindset, that it's always evolving. I'll say that. And I talked a lot about it in the chapter in our best-selling book, Redefine, because I bumped up against, I guess we could also call them limiting beliefs, maybe not trauma, so to speak. Some people, maybe their trauma, or there's traumatic stories within those limiting beliefs. And like, what are people that going to think about me if I become really big, or as big as I can be, and I keep evolving and growing? Am I going to lose some friendships or respect of the people that I love? Are they going to think certain things about me? All those questions and your fears, like you were saying, start to come up. I mean, that leads us to our one of our questions is like, how do you personally, when you have those fears and challenges come up, how do you overcome those? And for example, when I was guiding the women who were featured in my book, I really wanted their stories to be crafted in a way that they were not the victim in the story, even if they felt like that at the beginning. And they were targeted, perhaps, and maybe taken advantage of in some of the stories. As they progressed through the story, that they were able to shape it to say, what did I learn from this? How am I grateful for this person? Even if they showed me that they were a horrible person and I don't ever want to talk to them again, for example. Yet how did this lead me to where I am now and shape my life, that I can look back on it and say, actually, I needed to meet that person, go through this experience, and I'm so grateful. If they were reading this, they would know I forgave them and I have gratitude towards this experience, and I'm a stronger, better person. Like, how do you do that personally?
Yeah, you're speaking to, in my mind, what is kind of that heroine's journey of going from kind of the dark night of the soul to finding your empowered self on the other side. And probably similar to many of the women you spoke to in your book, I've been through my fair share of obstacles. And all of the limiting beliefs that you just mentioned about the fears that show up when we think about, what would happen if I was as big as my dreams, or what would happen if I showed up as my truest, authentic self? Those are all things that I have had to work through and am working through continuously. I wish I could say that I'm done, but I'm not. The biggest part for me is gaining awareness of what the belief is. And so the process that we use with the coach, with our clients, is the process that I use for myself. And so whenever I'm butting up against something that feels really, in your body, it just feels like it's tight and it's constricted and it's frustrating and you just can't move past it. I end up having to do our immunity to change process, which is, what is the thing that I'm trying to get better at? I'll give you an example of being the most authentic version of myself. And so transitioning from a more traditional executive coach to this executive coach that works with their clients and horses or clients and plants is kind of a pretty big variation from your traditional coaching route. And I had all of these stories in my mind about, what people would think about me if I told them that I was actually working with horses and working with plant medicine. They would think that I'm crazy, that, I've gone off the deep end and now I'm into crazy drugs, and, that I'm just kind of off my rocker in some way, shape, or form. And this was a really challenging thing for me to do, so much so that I was doing this work kind of underneath without telling people about it. People would find out from word of mouth, but I wasn't talking about it on social media, all of these things, until one day I was having a conversation with a colleague and I was just like, F it. I don't know what language I can use here. So we'll
You
just
can
say
use
that.
all of it. I always
Okay.
say not for kids because I like to cuss.
I was just like, fuck it. Like, this
Yeah.
is who I am. And what's going to happen if I actually say, like, I've taken a pivot in my career and I'm now working on peak experiences where, we dive really deep into some of the emotional and vulnerable places that we don't normally do in executive coaching. And it was in that moment that I was like, why was I so afraid of that? And so I think one of the things that I do is really try to unpack the stories that I have, these limiting beliefs, and where do they come from, and what do they sound like, and what do they feel like in my body, and allow them to just be seen. Okay, these are the things I'm scared of. And then usually I try these safe to try experiments. Where can I try to do something a little bit different? In that situation, it just kind of came out in I think a ball of frustration. I was just like, blah, this is what I'm doing. Right. And then you get to go back and be like, oh, that wasn't so scary. And, a few people were like, you're doing what? Like, help me understand what you're up to these days. But for the vast majority, people don't care. They don't care. They're so into their own story and what they're up to that they don't care what you're doing at the end of the day. And so that's kind of one example of, the ways in which I have to continually keep check of the stories and the narratives that I have going on in my mind.
The narratives, that's a really powerful word.
Yeah.
Because even a lot of times, in my own personal life, I feel I'm constantly unfolding or unraveling narratives that other people have about me within my
Oh, for
family.
sure.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's especially with people that are really close to you,
Yeah.
and these narratives that have been placed upon us for a lot of our lives. And then
Mm-hmm.
we start to, or I'm really inquisitive and I start to ask myself, does that narrative really fit me?
Yeah.
Or is that a story that has made other people feel more comfortable to put me
Yeah.
in that box? Yeah, but it's not really me.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think
And
that's everywhere.
so I have a teenager, and some of those narratives are also put onto her. And
Yeah.
it's stopping, or the buck stops with her most of the time, related with her grandparents. If they say something, she has really good words to be able to say, I'm gonna have to disagree with you on that.
Oh, good for
Like, I'm gonna
her.
stop you right there. And then she'll talk to me about it later and ask me, where did that come from?
Right.
I've never even heard anything. I've never heard you say anything like XYZ.
Yeah.
Where did this story originate?
Yeah.
Because it's a narrative, as you're saying, or a story. But
Mm-hmm.
sometimes makes others more comfortable to put somebody or something into a box and
Right.
then put it away and never really think about it again. And when we start to take those boxes out and unravel all the stories, we then can make our own book, right? Our own story, our own narrative that is
Mm-hmm.
more true to ourselves and who we really are.
100%. And I love that your daughter's doing it. What a great model.
Yes. No more generational traumas. Let's
Yeah,
stop. Let's
exactly.
there's quite a few that I have intentionally wanted to end with her, or with me having kids, or
Yeah.
the next generation.
Hmm.
And I want to move on to the next question too. It's a little different than the challenges,
Yeah.
are a little bit lighter. Of what do you feel like is the best morning routine? This question comes up a lot for me, and it's really, I mean, personally, it's really varied for me. It depends
Hmm.
on if I'm taking my daughter to school, or
Yeah.
if I try to do moisturizer now and wash my face. That's a big step.
That is. This is kind of a fun question because I've struggled with this myself, and it relates to the stories of like what entrepreneurs should do. What is a good entrepreneur and what does their day look like? And maybe I should do that. And I did a really great kind of mastermind this year, and they had a very prescribed what your morning should look like routine. And it related to, doing the most important things first and all this kind of thing. And at the end of the day, I've come to a place where I think every entrepreneur, every individual needs to answer that question themselves, because, I feel like similarly, I have several different routines that show up for me depending where I'm at. If my mind is running, if I'm in a fearful story, or if I've have, something stressful that's coming up that day, I may need to start with time with my horses, meditating, finding a way to really ground and move that energy so that I don't show up in a really nervous, kind of strange, ungrounded way. But then there's others days where, I am feeling like really good. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to go on a run today. I'm going to move my body. I'm going to get those creative juices running. And then other days I start by journaling, and so for me, the most important thing is to really get in touch with where am I in that morning, and then follow that lead versus trying to do something from a really prescribed way in which works well in someone else's life. I don't think that's the answer for everyone, but that seems like the best thing for me, at least.
Honestly, what you're describing, I know that, or I feel that a person can have masculine and feminine energies within themselves, but
100%.
from primarily supporting women or female identifying women, that feminine energy is about allowing, when we wake up, like allowing ourselves the space. And what do I need today?
Right.
Do I need to sleep another hour and
Yeah.
not feel bad about it?
Right.
I mean, those are the kind of questions I ask myself when I wake up. Do I need a little bit more sleep? Do I need to eat right away? Do I need a protein shake this morning? Do I need to work out? Do I need to instead do some meditation and stretch? Is that's about it. And I still have to process letting go of that guilt sometimes. Like you said, if I want to wake up by a certain time, but then I didn't sleep well the night before and I allow myself to sleep a little bit longer, I still have the residual
For
guilt
sure.
sometimes.
Yeah.
I gotta let that go, because that's like flowing into the day and starting off the day. Or if we are feeling tired, like overwhelmed, or something comes up, having the grace to reschedule, I think is still, it's a big challenge for me to even just allow myself. I overthink it, and I think the other person's going to
All right.
be upset or react. And in fact, if they did react in a negative way, that just tells me more feedback about them, not necessarily. So when I do have those moments that I have a good morning routine, or I allow myself to flow into it, I try to celebrate that,
Yeah.
because I think we probably can tend to be too hard on ourselves.
Mm-hmm. And I really love the distinction you called out around the feminine energy versus the masculine energy. Interestingly enough, the course that I did was 3 guys. They were leading it,
Mm-hmm.
And I do find in the feminine energy, it's much more of that intuitive kind of co-creative space. And so I love how you describe that of, allowing whatever needs to be, and not guilting ourselves and calling ourselves bad or whatever it might be when we make the decision to follow that.
Yes, and when you were talking, I immediately knew intuitively. Okay, these were men leading it. This is very masculine
Yeah,
because like
100%.
telling someone this is the recipe and you just do this, like you're just like gonna go after the day, you're just like gonna woo, it's like, well, and because even my fiance is really in his healthy masculine, and he says things to me like that, like I'm gonna do this, and it does work for him.
100%.
But like
Agreed.
that recipe, like you said, doesn't work for everybody. It's a great starting point. It's a great recommendation, but doesn't necessarily guarantee.
Right.
It might
Give it a
actually
try.
be a detriment if that is not, if someone needed a slower morning or needed to meditate or stretch or pray or be with themselves. It may not allow space for that.
Agreed.
That's a great takeaway, to allow space for yourself, or asking yourself the question, what is it that's going to support me the most?
Right.
Starting my day. And I really want to get to the next few questions. This is kind of similar to the challenge. Like, what do you do when you feel like you have resistance coming up? Is it maybe spend time with your horses or in quiet time or journaling?
Yeah. The most authentic answer is that I fight. Like, my immediate response when I feel resistance is that I push up against it. And I know we're not in a coaching conversation. So for anyone listening, that's not the thing that you should do. Let's just be really clear. But that is my natural instinct. When I feel resistance, I start to push out against it as well. And when I can catch myself doing that, it's exactly what you said in terms of the biggest thing that I try to do is just be still. So I've got a practice called consciously connected breathing, and it's nothing crazy. It's just connecting your in breath with your out breath with no gap on the top or bottom, and just try for 10 minutes to breathe. Because usually my resistance is, again, some kind of a story around how whatever is showing up is going to be bad for me, how it's going to cause me to do more work or something that I don't want to do. And in that 10 minutes of breathing, usually I can unwind that enough to just be like, oh, like this is the toxicity of my mind at times. And actually I can kind of reframe this and move forward in a different way. So I find my resistance is 90, or resistance, I should say, is 98% my own mind and 2% actually real. And so if I can unwind my mind for at least a little bit, I can kind of release that resistance.
It allows you the space to get into the zone, to then feel into that. When I'm coaching people and in personal relationships too, I find myself asking myself and them, if it comes up with I can feel the resistance a lot of times. That makes sense. I can feel it coming up for someone else. I can feel the change in their energy, and I'll ask them, where do you feel like this resistance is coming from? Or maybe if they're not in the space to answer that, like, where do you feel the resistance in your body right now?
For sure.
And then why do you feel, or what's the worst that could happen? Or what are you telling yourself that might happen related with this? What's the worst that could happen? And where or why do you believe this? Where is this originating from? I don't know. Sometimes there's a lot of tears that come then, and for myself too, when I start digging deeper.
And I love that you brought up the body, because I think our body helps us understand these situations so well. There's a great little mind body practice that, just like you said, like, where do you feel this resistance in your body? Like, oh, I feel it in my belly, right? It's tight, it's contracted, it's hot, it's whatever it is. And then if I can ask myself, like, okay, what's the emotion there? Oftentimes it's whatever, fear, anxiety, frustration. And then what is the message that part of you would give to you in this moment? And that seems to help me resolve the resistance as well, because that emotion and that body sensation usually bubble up enough inner knowing to be able to understand, why am I reacting in such a crazy ass way in this moment?
Yes, I love all of those. Also, something I asked a client recently was, what are you assuming in this moment?
Mm-hmm.
What are you assuming to be true about the other person and about yourself? Or can you take a step back and analyze what assumptions you might be making or points
Mm-hmm.
that you might be drawing, and are those really true?
Yeah.
Sometimes a lot of times they're not really true, fully true.
Mm-hmm.
What we assume. I mean, similarly, I wanted to dig a little bit deeper into the feelings that you brought up around shifting out of corporate, first of all, and then also shifting into a more unique, or I mean, from my point of view, it sets you apart about what you're doing with your coaching.
Right.
So a more unique or out of the box experience, or unorthodox. What would you say how did you transition in that kind of resistance of, I think you phrased it as, what are people going to think?
Mm-hmm.
Or like, where was that coming from internally for
Yeah.
you? I guess it's also like, I should be doing this. What should
Yeah.
I be doing?
There were a lot of shoulds in terms of, who I looked up to, who I admired in this field, and who I learned from. What were they doing? And it was this reflection of like, oh, I'm not doing that, or I don't feel drawn to that anymore. And then something must be wrong with me. But when I dug even deeper into that, it was about rejection. My fear of being rejected from my peer group, my fear of being rejected from past clients. And rejected might be a little bit strong, but just looked down upon, or, criticized. I am naturally, I guess, unfortunately, kind of a people pleaser. Like that's how I was raised. I've got that Minnesota nice in me, and really having to look at that differently in terms of, where am I sacrificing myself to please other people, or to fit in places that I probably don't belong in anymore, regardless. And so those were actually some really dark times for me to dig down into those messy places of, the places that I didn't accept myself yet, and then be able to, empower, find the strength and find the courage to kind of step out on my own.
And that is your authentic self. That is who you really are. Some of those, what I hear you saying too, is some of those places
Yeah.
you had pushed them down or put layers over them. Like, I'll look at that later, or
Mm-hmm.
that's not acceptable. Or what were some of the things that you feel like, even unconsciously, you maybe told yourself when you snuffed out, or you were snuffing out those parts of yourself?
Yeah, that, I think it was more along the lines of, well, I shouldn't be like that, because I had the great, um, honor of training with some really incredible people that, took a keen interest in how I do my practice. And now I was all of a sudden doing something totally different, and something that I didn't know if they would ever approve of. And, so it was, I don't want to look at that. That's too painful. I don't want to like disappoint these people. And so it was definitely, squashing a part of my authentic self, and that emerging, evolving authentic self that I didn't even really know all that well who that person was, until I did enough work. It was like, okay, this is who I am. This is what I'm going to do. And this is, if, like you said before, around, if you had to reschedule on a client, you're going to get really good data from that person around, are they upset, or are they like really, absolutely, you do what you need to do. So the same thing was true for me when I finally was like, this is what I'm doing, this is who I am. If people then rejected that, or felt I can't align with that person, or I can't be around that person, that gives me really important data about who is around me, and potentially who no longer needs to be around me.
And I would even go as far, I was having a similar conversation with a client the other day about, they had a self-discovery in that they were not being them. their true selves, I'm trying to describe in their words, they were, for most of their life, they had been a different version of themselves based on who they were around.
Yeah. The
Uh,
chameleon.
a
Mhm.
chameleon. Yeah, and there's a few people in my family that probably tend to do that. So sometimes more too. And I was bringing up the point to them that it's even not fair, really, to the people that they're interacting with, because they're probably not fully present. If
Mhm.
they're not even giving the other person that opportunity to see how amazing they are. And like you said, the data or the feedback of, does this person even truly accept me for me?
Right.
There's a person I really want to be around. They're robbing that person of that opportunity to truly get to know them, and then
Mhm.
walking away from the situation that no one really knows me. I don't
Mhm.
really have any real friends. These are things that people have told me too, that
Yeah.
are when I was younger, like, how can you just be yourself? Well, why, how's that so easy for you? I feel like I kind of need to, like you were describing, chameleon into these different situations because I want people to give me something, or I
Right.
want them to accept me, or because it probably always comes back to that of,
Mhm.
I want them to like me or feel love from them. And I'm worried that if I am the true version of myself, that I'm
Yeah.
not going to like the data that I get back.
Exactly. It's scary.
It is scary. Yeah. I mean, I feel like I came into the world with that trait, but it still can sting, right? When
Yeah.
you have the realization of, wow, this person really doesn't accept me.
Mhm.
And I can't change that.
You cannot.
Keep being myself and see how that goes, but it can still sting even when you come into you. It's part of that letting go, right?
Yeah.
And forgiving
Yep.
and
The constant.
understanding the constant forgiveness.
Mhm.
And I want to skip to the next question. This is probably my favorite one that I ask on all the podcasts,
Yeah.
because I think our childhoods have a
Yeah.
lot to do with the trajectory of our lives. And what I mean by that is that I think we all have a core blueprint.
Mhm.
I have my first course in the mastermind is the Empire Life Blueprint, about the core values that we are essentially born with, and a lot of those stories and narratives are how we were reacting
Yeah.
is from that nature, or there's the nurture versus nature, the nature that we're all innately born with, and that is really an incredible blueprint that somebody else can't replicate. Like, that's
Yeah.
just our blueprint
Yeah.
and our gifts. And I
Mhm.
was wanting to know a story that, or one of the first ones that came to mind, that reflects why you do what you do.
Yeah. It's this is a great question because I wish you were there for my like 18-year-old graduation, because my childhood was filled with like I was a little peanut, like I'm still short, petite, and when I was 7 or 8, my dad got me a horse, Zephyr Blue, who was a 3-year-old quarter horse. We lived on a big farm in a tiny town in Minnesota, and I spent all of my youth on the back of that horse. And so we'd explore all over, different rivers, different valleys, different, forests and groves. And it was a big part of who I was. And I was always like this dirty little kid, like not because my parents didn't clean me, but because it was like I love to be outdoors. I love to be exploring. I love to be dirty, playing in the mud, playing in the sand, all those kind of things. And then kind of another part of that was like I always was in collaborative sports. And so I was in volleyball and basketball, and I was always that supporting player. So I was a setter in volleyball, and then like a point guard in basketball. And the role of those is like, how do you set other people up for really good success? So that is who I was at my nature, my blueprint, like this animal nature earth baby that loves collaboration. And so what did I do? Like I thought I would be a great idea to like go off into this big city huge school and just do education, education, education. So I did like my undergrad, my master's, and my PhD all within like 10 years, climbing the corporate ladder in, downtown cities. So Minneapolis, Denver, San Francisco, got so far away from my roots. And my parents were always like, what are you doing? Like, we don't understand like this life that you're good for you. Like, keep going, but we don't understand it. And then, I'm early 40s. I'm 42 now. And I'm back at my very roots. And so back on a farm, I've got our horses. The horses are an integral part of our business now. We're growing our own food and gardens and all this kind of thing. So I was just like, why didn't I just pay attention to who I was at my very nature and then just follow that lead versus following this idea of what success looked like? So that's kind of coming 100% full circle back to like my 8-year-old self.
Your 8-year-old self would look at you now and say, yes, girl, go,
Yeah.
go.
What took you so long?
Yeah, you're doing it. You're living our dream.
Yeah, for sure.
That's so beautiful.
Yeah. Fun story.
That's incredible.
Mm-hmm.
And I was a setter and point guard too. So I'm with you. My daughter loves volleyball. She's really into that now as well. And she is a libero, or a lot of times setter and also libero.
Yep. Mm-hmm. I love
So
it.
that's super collaborative too, of setting the setter up.
Exactly. Like that is the digging down deep as the foundational player on the team. Absolutely.
Yeah, she's just everywhere, all over the court, so fast.
Love it.
And I wanted to go to the next question of even maybe this was one of them, of like not forcing it.
Yeah.
There's a book that a client was telling me about recently called Power versus Force, about really being in our power, and essentially letting things flow rather than pushing and feeling like we're always pushing or forcing something to happen. And I try to stop and breathe, like you were talking about a lot of times, because I do have that kind of like type A challenging challenger personality. I don't know if you know anything about the Enneagram. Like I'm a 8 on the Enneagram and an ENTJ, and I need to stop myself and ask, was this really, for example, with task, is this a task that I need to be doing? Or is this a task that I can guide a team member in doing? And they may even do it better than me and faster because that's their expertise and that's why they're on the team.
Yeah.
And am I forcing this relationship? Am I going to spend too long at this family event in my personal life? Like maybe take a step back, and how long do I need to spend there? Or how long do I need to do certain task to go back to business items? Or is there another task that's going to move the needle forward? So that you reminded me of that, the power versus force. And I wonder if that's one of your 5 things. But if you were going to start a business today, like what are the top 5 things that you feel like you wish that you had known?
Yeah. Can that one be all 5? That one is I'm living that one like in this very moment of where am I standing in power versus where am I forcing or pushing the river? And that my husband always says, Heather, just float. And I think that's just the most beautiful analogy for kind of a really driven, achievement-minded individual. Like, what would happen if you just float? And so that would be one of the things that I would say, and for me, because I'm going to drive, I'm a doer, I'm a tasker, I'm going to get shit done. But more often than not, you need to take a step back and see like, okay, what's moving, what's not moving, where is my energy like naturally growing, and where's my energy being depleted? And so that power and force is such a huge, huge, huge one. And I don't have it figured out yet, but it's one that's still on my list, and one that I continue to revisit every year. Another one that I would say is the power of relationships. And I think we spend a lot of time doing so many different things in our businesses that relationships can sometimes take a back seat. And this last year for me has partly been about reconnecting with the relationships that are life-giving, and the relationships that I can help another person out and they choose to help me out in those kind of reciprocal ways. And that the best way for me, at least, to grow in my business is those relationship referrals and connections, because then it's like this like-minded synergistic connection from the get-go. So relationships, along with that would be, work with people that you really love. We spend a lot of time at work, and so finding the tribe, the crew that you really vibe with. And it's not like all about rainbows and butterflies. We get along 100% of the time, but can you manage through conflict with love and with care? Can you have deep discussions, and can you further each other? Can you push each other while still remaining in kind of this cohesive relationship where you both deeply care about one another? And I think that's so important for founders, especially. I'm sure in your world, you work with folks who have founder issues. The co-founders are being the most difficult relationship. So that is one I've played with, had to learn the hard way. And
same here, not to interrupt you. My this is my third company. My second one, I had a co-founder, and I think it gave me confidence to know, okay, I could do this on my own fully. And I thank them for that experience. But it definitely was like, I'm doing this by myself.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. The last one that I would just say is, I would say purpose. And that, my story kind of revolved around doing things in the way that I was taught, and the ways that I was shown, versus doing things that was authentically true to who I am and what I see. And so always coming back to, is this, my deepest desire? Is this my heart's desire? Is this my heart's calling? And continue to move in those directions.
That's true. I was just asking myself that the other day, because I want to have a more narrow, maybe it's not the best word, of a smaller focus on programs that I feel really called to do, such as the mastermind that's coming up. I feel really called to lead a group of women through community and scaling together, and referrals or resources within that. And I personally want that for myself too. And haven't been able to find exactly what I'm looking for as well, related to with what I'm creating. But part of me then shifts, part of my brain shifts to, well, what about the women that are just starting out? I need 5 to 10 courses for them. And I'm like, wait, but that's not where this is just an example that my brain goes there. And then I say, wait, that wouldn't be fair for me to divert my attention away from what my heart is truly calling me to do for this group of women that I'm creating. And then letting that go, I feel almost, well, what happens when my sales team is talking to a woman who's in this place over here, and what do they offer them? Because I don't want to ever want somebody to leave with no support.
Right.
Like, does that look like a free PDF or being on the email list? I want something for them. So that's why my brain goes there. And then transitioning of, well, most of my focus has to be here though, because this is where my heart is guiding me, like you said.
I love that.
Just a lot of internal conversations, I'm sure a lot of entrepreneurs have.
Yeah, but the important ones in terms of being able to guide us in the way in which I think we're most beneficial for those we serve.
Yes, that's what it's all about. The intention that they feel supported and they have a place in the community, whether it's in a high level, a high end community, or a free community.
Right.
And before we hop off, this is kind of similar to the last one, where we're coming up on time. What are the 3 concepts that you really want to leave the audience with? Heather?
That's a tough question. And I'm sure we touched on a lot of them here, but I'm going to throw a couple new ones at us. And this is a relatively new experiment for me. And the idea that play is a really important ingredient in terms of our ability to evolve and grow. I think we take life really seriously at times, especially as entrepreneurs, driven entrepreneurs, women entrepreneurs, like, we gotta, stay focused. We gotta get ahead. Da, 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 da. And I've come to find that some of my biggest breakthroughs come when I'm having fun, when I'm playing, when I'm doing things that are just like joyful, spontaneous. And so I would leave that one out there for folks to just be like, where are the places where I could play a little bit more? I would say the second is near and dear to my heart around where can we move from fear and into love. And we talked a lot about the different beliefs and assumptions that can get in our way that are often rooted in fear. And so how do we begin to shift those to a place of that unconditional loyalty and friendship to self? And so that self and that power of the self can kind of overcome those fears. And the last one that I would say is kind of an interesting one is like life is medicine. We're exactly where we need to be, and life will continue to show us the things that we need to get better on, to leverage, to grow into strengths. And so if we can be present to what is all around us every day and find gratitude, I think that's the best medicine that we can take.
Yes, and being fascinated with what is this trying to teach me, or
Yeah.
what is the situation? It's maybe not the
Yes.
most fun question to always ask ourselves, but I always feel like I come back to that. And I had a play experience recently. I didn't even know that personal stylists exist in certain stores, and that they're actually complimentary.
Oh,
If you make an appointment. So
no
my
idea.
daughter and I did that recently, and we told them what we were looking for. And so when we got to the store, there was 2 huge dressing rooms just full of clothes that were our sizes that we could try on. And it was play, and it was fun. It was also like I was sweating because we were like, oh, try this on. Like, we got so into it. And so it was almost like exercise and a sport too at the same time.
I love it. I've never heard of it.
The best way to shop. I was like, how did I never know about this before? Because a lot of times I walk in and I don't find what I'm looking for, and then I leave and I end up still not having anything to wear.
Me as well.
It was incredible. And the personal stylist was for both my daughter and I. And we had a private room that had a curtain and like 2 big dressing rooms and a whole rod of clothes. And then we could say, hey, I need this size, or I want this in this color. And she was constantly checking on us and gave us water even. It's a beautiful, we're going to do that a few times a year now.
That's perfect. How fun.
And like you said, it felt like play, and it was also going through, I think, an upper limit of I deserve this.
Right.
I deserve this kind of attention and care.
And
it's very creative to get into your style. And I may not know the latest styles. And she knows the latest styles, as that's her job. It was really incredible.
How fun. I love that example.
And we're going to put also all of your social media links in the show notes.
Perfect.
So make sure to subscribe to if you're listening to this, so you can catch all the latest podcast episodes. And thank you so much, Heather, for being with us today.
Thank you as well. It's been fun.